I've been the pastor of a church for 12 years and was invited to be the chaplain to the elite of the world, which I did for 3 years. The people you hear about in the World Bank, the IMF, and the top oil company officials of the world, that was 35 years ago. I've kept in touch with these people over the years. They're now in their 70s and 80s. And when I want to know what's really going on behind closed doors, I pick up the phone and call one of them. What is really going on behind this? What is the real story? The most dastardly act that has ever been perpetrated on the American people in the history of this country took place when the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Mr. Bernanke, announced that the Federal Reserve will purchase $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities and treasuries each month indefinitely. Something's wrong. There's more to it than meets the eye. Where will the Federal Reserve get $40 billion every month indefinitely to buy mortgage-backed securities? Immediately, my elite friend said without any hesitation, he said, "Chaplain, out of thin air.
Welcome to the next 4 years. I am your host, Lindsey Williams. Just after the presidential election, I contacted my elite friend and I asked the question, what will be the agendas of the elite for the next 4-year period? What I heard was so startling. The information that I received, I was stunned. I had trouble believing even what I was hearing. I tried to figure out, how can I do this? By what method can I tell the American people what's happening? For a number of weeks' time, I did not even do a radio show. I was afraid to give any of the information out. After that, I said, okay, let me try to see how I can possibly tell this. The first thing I did was, I've got to record it. This must be on record. no one can ever say I didn't say it. So this is the reason for this DVD. But when I tried to put together a DVD to give this material as we normally do on 3 DVDs or a 3-hour session, it was a total impossibility. I couldn't do it. So I said, let's see how we can produce this. I began writing out my information for a 3-hour DVD session, and I realized I was going to need a multitude of people to help me explain what I had just heard. Now, I knew the background to this material because of being in contact with my elite friends on a regular basis prior to the election, but now what he had given me after the election, I said, it's going to require many people to help me tell this story just to be able to explain to you the background material so that I could give the main points. So I began with a 3-hour DVD series entitled The Next 4 Years. But then I realized I can't leave the American people here. There've got to be solutions. I started thinking, who do I get to help me provide all the solutions necessary to what you're going to need in order to survive the next 4 years? First thing that came to my mind was a Wall Street insider whom I've known now for a number of years, whom I was put in touch with by my elite friends. And I contacted him and I said, do you think that you could help me explain to people what they can do? He said, sure. This individual contacted some people who are on Wall Street today, and he asked them, how does this relate? I had given him my main points. I had told him what I had been told, basically. And he went to those who are on Wall Street right now, whom he knows personally, and said, can you help me? Well, he came back, I guess it was probably the following day on the phone. He called and he said, Lindsey, you are going to be stunned by what I found out. I said, fine. Can we help the American people? Whether they be a multimillionaire or whether they be an average middle-class American, whether they be a person on the street, no matter who it may be, can we tell them everything that they will need in order to survive the next 3 years? That required a second DVD series, and we are entitling it, How to Survive the Next 4 Years. Now, this first DVD series that you're watching right now, it is a gift. It will be given to you with the second DVD series, How to Survive the Next 4 Years. The only way that I could put together the controversial material that's involved in order to tell you what I had heard, and pulling in all the many sources that were necessary in order to give you the background to this material. I mean, this is so in-depth. You can imagine how I was stunned and startled to the point. I oftentimes will do 3 and 4 radio shows per day, and I didn't do a single show for weeks. I said, I can't give this out till I give all the material together in the background. So as a result, I pulled in all of these sources from every place that I could possibly imagine to help you understand the background to the information that I had been given by my elite friend. Therefore, you have at your disposal 2 DVD series. The first one entitled The Next 4 Years. The next one, How to Survive the Next 4 Years. Now, in this first DVD presentation, I will give nothing but what I was told. Some of it may be a little difficult, and you might be surprising. Much of this could actually be encouraging to you, because if you understand the mindset and the thought patterns of the elite, you will be able to spare your dinner table and your household much heartache. But only when you know the issues can you do something about it. A person who hides their head in the sand like the ostrich, they're the ones that are going to have a difficult time. But you are going to know every major elite idea every agenda of the elite and some other very startling things that have never been told by me. I didn't know them until just the other day, or by any elite, because after the election, some things developed in the elite world that you are going to find so amazing. Well, that gives you an idea of these two DVD series. Both of them you must have together. I urge you to view all of this DVD series first before you even begin on how to survive the next 4 years. I'm going to deal with this subject matter with the following subjects. Number one, the dollar will be phased out. Now, please, if you know what to do, you don't need to be afraid. You don't have to look behind bushes everywhere you go. Don't look for black helicopters everywhere you go. These are things that you can survive. Remember, there were many people in 1929 through 1933, in the time of the Great Depression, who knew that the Depression was coming. They made preparations in advance, and as a result, when the Great Depression came, they made great fortunes. Now you're going to know the facts. You know, I feel so honored and so privileged that God, years ago, would have allowed me, by His providence, 36 years ago to be exact now, to know some of these elite people, and over these 36 years to keep in touch with them, so that I can tell you in advance many things that will spare you great heartache. And so today I feel honored that I can tell you all of the agendas of the elite for the next 4 years, and you in turn can take action. And when you view the second DVD series, How to Survive the Next 4 Years, you'll know everything that you can do. I'll deal with it in this subject matter. The dollar will be phased out. Secondly, the Middle East. Yes, there is a complete change in some of the ideas in the Middle East. Constitution is going to be done away with. This I don't like to talk about, but I have no choice. I must tell you what they've told me. Socialism will be introduced. Again, religion. Oh, please. When we come to this subject, the devil's Messiah. You heard me talk about it 4 years ago in the DVD series that I did entitled The Elite Speak. Healthcare. It's on everyone's mind. Firearms. Oh yes. There's a very definite, but you'll be amazed how firearms fit into all of this. Again, the youth corps. Watch out, young people. You must know this. And parents, it's so vital for you to understand this for the sake of your children. Private enterprise, what's going to happen to it? You know what's happened to GM and Chrysler already. I'll tell you what the agenda of the elite is for private enterprise. And then, what can we believe? Can we really believe anything that we see and hear? Well, let me begin first of all by giving you something so fascinating that when I heard it, I'm still stunned. Now, you and I both know, as was announced by Daddy Bush, George Herbert Bush, many years ago, that the elite have an agenda. You know that agenda is the New World Order. Now, there's some other things that have come into this, some very fascinating events that have evolved in relation to it. The elite now have a situation on their hands that's different than they've ever had in your lifetime and mine. They have a president in office who the first 4 years that he was in office, he double-crossed the elite numerous times. I mean, it was horrible. Now keep in mind, the elite think they're God, but they really aren't. And they don't always get their way. So some of the things that you're going to be hearing, they will probably happen, but there was one item that I still stick by, and that is the elite did not want the present president that's in as president of the United States of America. He double-crossed them. You remember when the pipeline was to go across Canada. And Mr. Obama waited 1 week, he waited 2 weeks, and finally he said, we're not going to have a part in it. America won't take part in this. And as a result, the elite wanted it. They had to have that pipeline for numerous reasons. And you remember that I called my elite friend just after that happened, and I said, what is going on? He was livid. He was beside himself almost. And he said, Chaplain, Obama double-crossed us in favor of his Muslim Brotherhood friends. And he wants to keep the supply of oil coming in from the Middle East. And he said, in turn, he did not do what we wanted. You remember the Dobbs-Frank bill? The elite didn't want it. Obama pushed it through. There were numbers of times in the first administration, first 4 years, that Mr. Obama double-crossed the elite. Now, he's back in office. The elite know that he's uncontrollable. You heard me correctly. They understand that they have on their hands a man that he might do what they want and he might not do what they want. So as a result, you've got a situation where you have the elite in control, then you have a president that's like a bull in a china shop. The elite are trying their best to carry out certain agendas, but you're going to have two agendas during this administration. Please understand this. And this is what my elite friend told me. He told me, you don't have one agenda anymore, Chaplain. You've got two agendas. Number one is the agenda of the elite. And he said, number two, you've got the agenda of Mr. Obama as president. But here's the startling part. And I'm still, again, surprised at what they had to say. They said, Chaplain, you've got an agenda of, now please catch these words carefully. This is the first time you'll ever hear this. And I got it just the other day. And he said, Chaplain, you now have the agenda of a renegade new elite. Now, did you catch that? No, you'll not see this in any financial newsletter. You won't hear it on the national news. If you didn't know an elite personally, there's no way that you would know this. Let me try to explain it. You've heard, I'm sure, of BRICS. BRICS is a combination of nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Listen to what BRICS comprises. It comprises 43% of the world's population, 18% of the world's GDP, gross domestic product, and of all things, 53% of the global financial capital. Now, this is a major bloc. And this group of nations met together and they said, we are going to form our own bloc of nations. We will buy, sell, trade amongst each other, use Chinese currency and not the American dollar. And this is what my elite friend explained to me is a renegade elite that has sprung up. Now, keep in mind what we have so far. We have a number of factions here. This will be such a help to you as you understand this and watch it from day to day and what takes place. Number one, you have the old-time elite that have been in place for as long as my lifetime and yours has remembered. Then you have a president who is somewhat out of control, but yet under control. Then you have this renegade elite that has sprung up. Keep in mind something. The elite don't always get their way. They usually do. They think they're God, but they really aren't. And they don't always get what they want. You have something here that, at this point, I must bring it out. For 56 years, I've been a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I have been a student of the Word. And all down through the ages, there have at times been divine intervention. Now, the elite can't control that. They can control their other factors to a certain extent. But divine intervention, they cannot necessarily. So, keep in mind that this could, in some ways, affect what the elite do. There's one thing that the elite want at this point. They have these factions to deal with, but they want massive debt creation. This will be of a great help to you in planning your own life. And again, when you hear me make this statement, please don't stop doing what you're doing. You must continue your preparation. The elite do not want a collapse of the currencies of the world yet. Now please catch this. Now you remember back about a year ago, nearly all the newsletters were saying, oh, there's going to be a worldwide financial collapse. Oh, within the next 3 months, the European Union, the dollar's going to collapse. And I went to my elite friend and I said, is the dollar going to collapse? Is the European Union, the euro going to collapse? He just smiled and he said, Chaplain, no. He said, it's not time yet. And I'd go back on radio talk shows and I'd say, not going to collapse in January, February, March. Then I'd go back again April, May, June, and then I'd go back again August, September, October, and November days. Please, keep in mind, the elite are not ready for a financial collapse yet. They want to create such massive debt that every nation in the world, every person, every country, every county, every city, the United States of America, the European Union, they want massive debt like the world has never seen before, has never experienced before. They want created in such a manner that when they get ready to bring in their new world order, they will have everything under their control. Debt creation is what you're going to see in coming days. They want it to the point that you won't be able to make your house payment. They want the price of gasoline to go up. They want the American dollar to go down in its purchasing power. And they want to create a situation where every city, every county, every individual is in such horrible condition, so much in debt, until there's no way that you can put food on the table, clothes on the back of the children, gasoline in the gas tank, and pay the mortgage payment at the same time. And in turn, when you can't make that mortgage payment, they repossess and never give you a thing back for all the years you paid into that mortgage. This is what the elite want for every nation in the world, not just the individual, but every nation, every county, every city. They want such debt created that when they get ready to foreclose on everything, whether it be nations or individuals, they will have everything right where they want it. I think possibly Ron Paul put it about as well as anyone when he was giving his farewell speech from Congress. I think he was probably over 20 years in the House of Representatives. And when Ron Paul left, he said a lot of things. He put it very well. And around that same time, Ron Paul said that he feels that the dollar will hold up for another 2 years. Well, I'm going to go a step further. According to what my elite friends have indicated to me, you may have 1 year, you may have 2 years, you may have 3 years before there's going to be a major problem with the American dollar. Don't stop making preparations. You must continue what you're doing. But you've bought some time here. And the elite are going to create such massive debt. Now, you've never seen such taxes as you're going to face. Horrible taxes. I know all you've heard lately is tax the rich, tax the rich. That is nothing but a smokescreen to distract your attention away from what they actually intend to do. You are going to see the middle class of Americans taxed to the hilt, more than rich, more than anyone else. Now, I don't know that this will be the name of what they're going to call it, but you may see, just watch these now, you may see something called a marginal minimum tax. You may see placed on America a national sales tax. They call the health care bill a tax. They couldn't find a way to constitutionally and legally force you to buy health care, so they convinced the Supreme Court that health care could be tax called a tax. And now they can tax you for health care where they could not have forced you to make that payment every month, but they'll place it in the form of a tax. And so that's what the Supreme Court said. Folks, you cannot comprehend the taxes that the middle class of America are in store for. You are going to be taxed to death. You remember it. It was 2009. I produced a DVD series back in those days, and it was entitled The Elite Speak. I had just talked with my elite friend on the phone. He was in his 80s at the time, and he said to me some things that were so startling. One of the things he said was, he said, "Chaplain, within possibly the next 2 years, you will be so broke, you will not be able to do anything about it." And I couldn't understand that at the time. I can readily see it now. Because first of all, it was QE1 and QE2, and then they came down with the other things. Now, it's tax the rich. Forget it. The rich don't pay taxes. You remember what I said to you in the latest DVD presentation that I made, Secrets of the Elite. They have a way around all of those things. But you, the middle class, 9-to-5 job, you can't get away from it. You have never seen the taxes. Now, when these taxes are placed on you, watch it. You'll see it take place. Then the price of gasoline goes up. The dollar declines in its purchasing power. What are you going to do? You're going to put food on that table first. Then you'll be concerned about how you pick that mortgage payment. But if you can't make the mortgage payment, they come in and repossess the house. All of this is a part of the debt creation that the elite wish to accomplish over the next 4 years. The greatest agenda of the elite in the next 4 years is debt creation to get you deeper and deeper in to the that you can't possibly get out. America, we have a national debt that is exorbitant. It can never be paid back. And it never will, and it's going to go up. You have never seen the like. Mark my words. The debt limit is going to be suspended. Did you catch this? It's already being talked about. Watch it. Keep in mind now that the things that you're hearing today that the elite have told me are things that will take place over a 4-year period. I'm trying to help you understand what will take place in the next 4 years. I had to gather many people together in order to try to help me explain all of this. Therefore, I'd like you at this time to watch very carefully debt and what it's really all about.
Have you ever questioned why Congress does not reduce spending and balance the budget? The answer will shock you. They can't. Not even if they remove every department, employee, as well as the military. I'm Hal Mason, a retired accountant, and have worked with budgets over 40 years. This February, the White House released the United States budget. I was stunned to discover Congress can't balance the budget, even if they shut down the government. The dilemma facing Congress is startling. Watch as you see a budget that can't be balanced. To understand Washington's budget dilemma, we simply click on the President's budget for fiscal year 2013. Page 210 provides 12 years of budget data. We will only look at this year, 2012. Washington will spend $3.8 trillion. However, it will only collect $2.5 trillion in taxes, resulting in a deficit of $1.3 trillion, an amount larger than what Congress appropriates to operate the federal government. Now to explain the dilemma. Government spending is broken down in 3 simple categories: interest, mandatory programs, which is entitlements and government pensions, and the federal government, which is called discretionary programs. It breaks down the government in 2 pieces: security related, which includes the military, and non-security, which encompasses any spending that is not related to the nation's security, such as Department of Education, Energy, etc. We simply cross out the federal government, and the remaining cost exceeds all tax revenues. The problem is simple. Spending for mandatory programs and interest is greater than the tax revenues collected. Mandatory programs include Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment, and federal pensions. Congress must pay the interest and has promised to pay the pensions and entitlements. So the dilemma they face is that after the checks are processed for mandatory programs and interest, there isn't $1 left to fund the military or any federal employee, department, or office. You now understand their dilemma. To balance the budget, Congress would either have to raise taxes 50% or eliminate the federal government. If they cut entitlements and pensions, our nation will have riots like Greece. The United States only collects $2.5 trillion in taxes. More than half comes from income taxes, a third from payroll taxes, and the remaining from excise, estate duties, and some miscellaneous taxes. These aren't quite enough to even pay for the interest or the mandatory programs. Selecting Historical Table 7.1 reveals a grave problem. Spiraling debt that exceeds 100% of the gross domestic product, a liability that exceeds our nation's annual economy. And as I chart the debt, it reveals Washington's uncontrollable addiction to borrowing. The budget projects this year over $16 trillion debt and $26 trillion this decade, soaring debt that has the United States on a path identical to Greece. And if you thought Greece was a problem, the United States has 32 times their debt. $16 trillion is 25% of the world's gross domestic product. As Washington is racing toward the cliff, there is no hint of slowing down. And for the first time in our history, the United States has lost its AAA rating on its Treasury debt. Greece provides a preview of what happens when a nation is forced to deal with massive debt. Greece recently was downgraded to the lowest rating on the scale. Investors lost 70% in the recent European bailout, and the bailout of bonds are now rated as junk bonds. The question is not if, but when the United States will collapse from the weight of the soaring debt. And we need to ask, what are we paying these Washington intellects to do? They have no approved budget, they borrow every dollar to operate, and they estimate debt will soar to $26 trillion. Instead of solving the crisis, they raise the debt ceiling. There is a tipping point where the debt can no longer be sustained. So our nation can either get involved or be buried in the ashes. So you ask, what can be done to correct this crisis? The answer is painful. First, Washington must admit the problem. Second, it must explain the problem to everyone. And third, we must face the pain of fixing the problem. It won't be solved by arguing over who pays the highest fares on the sinking Titanic. Everyone is going to feel the pain, as the United States must cut into entitlements, pensions, government spending, as well as get a fair tax code that doesn't cripple the economy. Everyone must vote for representatives who will focus on the financial solvency of the United States. If not, we will all go down with the ship.
Congress has been threatened. The national debt is out of control. You haven't seen anything yet to what it's going to be over the next 4 years. The past 4 years, it was only a trial run. It's going to increase phenomenally. Now, the national debt is so great, they know there's nothing they can do about it. Therefore, Congress has been threatened that they must pass certain bills. The elite want 10 banks. I hope you're catching this. You'll see it happen over the next 4 years. All of your different banking systems are going to go under as the dollar begins its collapse. And you will see the beginning of the collapse of the dollar. Don't think that just because I said that it's possibly 2, maybe 3 years before you see a complete major dollar crisis, that it's not going to begin its crisis now. The crisis is beginning even at this point, and you will see the purchasing power of the dollar going down very rapidly. Congress has been threatened in that they must do something. The elite want 10 banks total. So the more the dollar can fail and bring under control all of the banks, and 10 banks that are too big to fail. Now, when I saw what Congressman, House of Representative member, I believe it was, Brad Sherman said, I was utterly amazed. I'd like you to hear him tell it in his own words that Congress was threatened if they didn't do certain things. So listen, if you will, to Congressman Brad Sherman.
The only way they can pass this bill is by creating and sustaining a panic atmosphere. That atmosphere is not justified. Many of us were told in private conversations that if we voted against this bill on Monday, that the sky would fall, the market would drop 2,000 or 3,000 points the first day, another couple thousand the second day, and a few members were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no. That's what I call fear-mongering. Unjustified. Proven wrong. We've got a week, we've got 2 weeks to write a good bill. The only way to pass a bad bill, keep the panic pressure on.
A part of debt creation is the most dastardly act that has ever been perpetrated on the American people in the history of this nation, which took place on September the 13th of 2012, when Mr. Bernanke of the Federal Reserve announced that the Federal Reserve would buy $40 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities every month, indefinitely. Well, as soon as I heard this, you heard it, it was on the national news. They didn't try to hide it, but it's a part of what the elite are doing in creating massive debt. Because every time that the Federal Reserve, well, here we go. I contacted my elite friend and I said, there must be more to it than what's on the national news. Well, he said, Chaplain, what can I answer for you? I said, first of all, where is the Federal Reserve going to get $40 billion every month indefinitely? His answer was beyond my wildest imagination. He said, Chaplain, very simple, out of thin air. I said, but wait a minute. The economy is in shambles. The housing market bubble has burst. Massive people out of work. National debt beyond belief. And I said, the Federal Reserve is going to pull out of thin air with nothing to back it, no gold, no silver, no farmland, no tangibles, no nothing. Pull out of thin air $40 billion every month indefinitely and going to buy mortgage-backed securities. And he said, Chaplain, that's exactly right. Now let me try to explain what a mortgage-backed security is. A mortgage-backed security is, if I could put it in simple terms, your house. That's correct. You went to the lending institution one day and you said, I'd like to buy a house. And they said, fine. We'd be more than happy to loan you the money if your credit will allow. So they made a credit check. You could buy it. Well, maybe you couldn't buy it. A number of years ago, they gave it to most everybody. And they said, all right, you give us that piece of land, that house, you give us that property, that house, as collateral on the mortgage. So you said, fine, you signed on the dotted line, and you went and began to live in your house. And you called it your house. Well, it really isn't your house. Until you have made that last mortgage payment, you do not get a warranty deed. So the Federal Reserve now is buying mortgage-backed securities. That's what your house is. It is a security, and that mortgage that you got on that house is backed by the piece of property. So the Federal Reserve now, out of thin air, is pulling $40 billion every month and buying your house mortgage, if it's mortgaged. They're buying the shopping center down the street that has a mortgage. They're buying the small business that used a piece of property as a backing for their small business loan. And they are buying those every month. $40 billion worth. Now, you worked hard for your house. What is the Federal Reserve getting it for? Thin air. You heard me correctly. That's all they paid for it. Out of thin air, and they're buying your house. Then the next question I asked my elite friend, I said, now, the Federal Reserve has $40 billion now every month of these mortgages, these mortgage-backed securities. I said, what are they going to do with them? Are they just going to put them into a lockbox and let them sit on a shelf somewhere? And he said, no, Chaplain. I said, well, what are they going to use them for? He said, they're going to use them to invest in the derivative market. Now, folks, please, you must do a crash course on derivatives. I've tried to say this before in other DVD presentations. It's more important now than it's ever been. The elite, the Federal Reserve, New World Order, whatever you'd like to call them, they are going to take your house mortgage and invest it in the derivative market, and they're going to take $40 billion every month and invest it of these mortgage-backed securities, and they're going to do it by fractional reserving them. It's bad enough to take those mortgages and package them together and put them into a Las Vegas-style one-armed bandit gambling syndicate, and that's exactly what the derivative market is. It has no controls. It's not regulated by the United States government. Congress numbers of times has tried to pass some bill to regulate the derivative market, and the elite have always bought the congressman off enough to be able to never allow that bill to pass. There are no regulations on it. Every bank in the world is involved in it, and it is nothing more than a one-armed bandit Las Vegas syndicate gambling ring for the super wealthy who have millions and billions and trillions of dollars. And now the Federal Reserve is going to take your house mortgage and that shopping center down the street and that small business mortgage and going to package them together and fractionally reserve them and invest them in the derivative market. That means $40 billion every month will become $360 billion worth of profits. And over a 3-month period, it'll be approximately $1 trillion that the Federal Reserve is making off of your house mortgage, and a Chinaman may own it. That's right. Anybody can play the derivative market. It may be a Russian. It could be somebody in Japan that's going to own your house mortgage. Well, my next question was, all right, they've pulled out of thin air $40 billion. They bought these mortgage-backed securities. So your lending institution that you got that mortgage with, it might have been Bank of America, it might have been Chase, it might have been Fannie, Freddie, whatever it may have been, the lending institution that gave you that mortgage, now that lending institution or that group of lending institutions has $40 billion every month. What are they going to do with it? I asked my elite friend, what are they going to do? Those lending institutions. My gracious, $40 billion a month. Can you imagine what this would do for the economy of the United States of America? It could pull us out of the slump that we're in. It could put small businesses back to work. It could solve much of the problem of America. I said, surely. QE1, they didn't do what they did this time. QE2, they didn't do what they did this time. You see, you heard a moment ago what Brad Sherman said. Congress has been threatened. They have no choice. They said, either you do what we want, or there'll be riots. There'll be a collapse. The whole financial system will go on. The elite have the power any day they want to bring down the entire financial system of the world. They aren't ready to do it yet. I hope you've caught this so far. I've been trying to tell for months. I'll go back every 3 months to my elite friend and I'll say, is it going to be the next 3 months? And he says, no, we're not ready yet. I'm telling you again, the elite are not ready to bring about a worldwide financial collapse yet. They're going to, but not yet. But part of creating the debt that's necessary, they want your house mortgage. They eventually want it because you can't make your payment. And then they'll come back and repossess it. And who's going to repossess it? The person who holds the paper that bought it from the institution that you borrowed the money from. None other than the Federal Reserve, the elite, the New World Order. Okay, I hope you're catching this. Please go back and tell every person that you possibly can before it is over. With the elite with the Federal Reserve borrowing $40 billion every month and buying mortgage-backed securities, and they're pulling that out of thin air, not borrowing it, but pulling out of thin air, and buying mortgage-backed securities, the Federal Reserve will own every piece of mortgaged real estate in the United States of America before this program is over. You remember me saying to you back 3 or 4 years ago when my elite friend told me, he said, Chaplain, the elite basically want to control everything. And I wondered how they could possibly control people's homes and the automobile that you own and the business that you go to. I wondered how they could do this. Are you beginning to realize that the elite now have a plan whereby they will own every piece of mortgaged real estate in the United States of America before this is over, and then all they need to do is collapse the American dollar at some point when they get ready to do it, and those businesses, that shopping center, your house, you cannot make your house mortgage payment, and they merely come in and own it and rent it back to you the rest of your life. You've heard me say for 35 years, the name of the game is control. This is a part of the control factor of the elite. And so then I asked my elite friend, I said, what are these lending institutions going to do with $40 billion every month? September, October, November, December, January, February, all right, owned as indefinitely. They said, I hope that you're holding on to your chair when I say this. He said to me, he said, Chaplain, they're going to invest it in treasuries. I said, wait a minute. They're not going to put it into the economy. They're not going to try to help us get out of the mess we're in and solve the national debt problem and create more businesses and jobs for people. He said, Chaplain, by prior agreement behind closed doors, the lending institutions of America are going to take that $40 billion and not invest it in the economy, nor in the real estate market, nor in housing. They're going to invest it in treasuries. Now, you know what a T-bill is. You've heard of those. They're probably the most sought-after paper in the world because everyone has always considered them to be the soundest investment that a person could make. But we have out there trillions of dollars of national debt. It basically is backed up by T-bills and other Federal Reserve issues. There's no problem with the debt. Congress knows the debt will never be paid. You know it'll never be paid. There's not enough gross domestic product in America to pay off that national debt. But there's something that must be paid. The interest on the national debt. The super wealthy of the world, the Arabs, China, Japan, nations of the world have bought our T-bills because they were secure. There is interest that must be paid on those T-bills, on those issues of the Federal Reserve. That debt can't fail to be paid because the day it does, the American dollar will automatically collapse without anybody having to pull any strings. What are they going to do? The Federal Reserve was in trouble. Nations of the world and the super wealthy of the world stopped showing up last year to buy our T-bills because they're concerned about our national debt and the economy of the United States of America. So as a result, we had to pay that debt. How do you do it? Pull out of thin air $40 billion, have a mortgage-backed security, invest it in the derivative market. That $40 billion be turned around and guaranteed that the Federal Reserve will get it back after they pull $40 billion out of thin air to buy those mortgage-backed securities, which is brick and mortar and stone and land, and put it in a gambling ring, the derivative market, and then guarantee that that $40 billion that they gave back to those lending institutions to buy those mortgage-backed securities is going to be invested in treasuries, which in turn will pay the interest on the national debt and keep the dollar from collapsing as quick as it could or would. Are you beginning to see the picture? The elite do not want a collapse of the currencies of the world yet. They do. And it will happen. But it will happen when they're ready for it to happen. But they don't want it to happen yet. They want to create such massive debt that it will be mind-boggling as to what will take place. So as a result, these lending institutions are doing this. Now, do your math for me a moment. I want to give you some figures here, if I may, for just a moment. The moment that the Federal Reserve said that they were going to buy those mortgage-backed securities, something happened. You may want to jot these down, and then you can do your own math from this point on. The instant that the Federal Reserve announced that they were going to buy $40 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities every month, that instantaneously, that moment, gold went up $49. That's 3%. Silver went up $3, 9%. Gas at the gas pump, that very hour, went up 15 cents. That's 4%. Every month that the Federal Reserve continues this program, it is going to destroy the purchasing power of the American dollar because $40 billion is pulled out of thin air and thrown out into the marketplace, and it diminishes the value of the other currency that is already out there to the point that, now do your math, please, watch this carefully. You can figure right now how long it's going to be before the dollar collapses. Yes, you heard me correctly. You can figure it right now. Take that 4% that gasoline went up at the gas pump and figure every month there's going to be an approximate 4% of the devaluation of the American dollar because of what the Federal Reserve is doing, and continue to devalue the American dollar's purchasing power 3 to 4% every month. And you tell me how long it's going to be before you can put food on the table, put gasoline in the gas tank, put clothes on the back of the family, and pay the mortgage payment at the same time. And what is it that the elite want? The elite want massive debt until you've lost everything and are under their control and the dollar is devalued to the point that you will be begging for another currency when your children are crying for food. It's all a part of the debt creation, and you, right now, can figure for yourself on your own calculator how long it's going to be before the American dollar collapses. Now, you heard me say it's not going to happen in the next few months. It'll happen somewhere probably through this administration of 4 years, and watch it. And you can figure it for yourself. At this point, I think you need to have someone else help me explain exactly what's happening.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. The way Bush has done it over the last 8 years, added $4 trillion by his lonesome, that's irresponsible. It's unpatriotic. We cannot and will not sustain deficits like these without end. That's why today I'm pledging to cut the deficit we inherited by half by the end of my first term in office. That's why today I'm pledging to cut the deficit we inherited by half by the end of my first term in office. We are paying the price for these deficits right now.
Combine all of the debt of every nation on the face of the earth, except America. Combine all those nations together, and the United States of America has more national debt, just our one nation, than all the nations of the world combined. And you think what's happening in Greece can't happen here, in France, in Italy, and Ireland? Yes. We're in worse shape than they are. It's just that it hasn't shown up here yet, and it won't for a while. Fortunately, we have the Federal Reserve that can get out of much of the mess that we're in. Now, the European Union, please mark this down, you can know before the financial collapse takes place. You can know in advance, and you'll have time to do something about it. You won't have time to do all the things you want to do because, remember, the purchasing power of the dollar is going to diminish at an alarming rate over these next 4 years, to the point that when the elite finally do get ready to collapse the euro first and then the American dollar, it'll be too late for you to get that paper out of the bank. Please write down one expression. If it's written on a piece of paper, it's worth the paper it's written on. You may hear that more than once in this presentation. Keep in mind also that if some of the things that you're hearing concern you, don't be concerned and don't lose sleep over it. There will be solutions to all of this. I'm presenting only what the elite have told me will take place over these next 4 years. Then we'll give solutions to all of this in our second DVD series entitled How to Survive the Next 4 Years. Now, write down the word for me, derivative. There is a way that you can know before the American dollar collapses. Number one, the European Union, the euro, will collapse first. You will have a few weeks after the euro collapses before the American dollar makes a major plunge, and you must, at that point, do something about it. Secondly, I have been told what will happen and that I can know in advance before all of this happens. I was on the phone with my elite friend one day, and I said, I have a family. I have to provide food on the table. I'm concerned. I need to know what to do. Can you please help me? And over these years, they have answers. They know what to do. They've prepared themselves. And so he said to me, he said, okay, Chaplain. He said, I will tell you how you can know the progression of the destruction of the American dollar. Now, this is going to surprise you because it's not the stock market. In fact, he said to me, He said, don't pay any attention to Wall Street. He said, that is not an indicator of anything. He said, the plunge protection team controls Wall Street on any given day. He said, Chaplain, don't pay any attention even to Europe. He said, even though they're in trouble over there, don't pay any attention. He said, North and South Korea, Iran, none of those things. He said, that is not the indicator. I said, well, what is the indicator of how I can watch the progression and know in advance, a few months at least, before the dollar has a collapse? He said, Chaplain, one word: derivatives. Now, this may be something you've heard of, maybe it's something you've never heard of. You must do a crash course on it. We'll talk about it some in our series, How to Survive the Next 4 Years. The derivatives, basically, if I could put it in layman's terms, are nothing more than a Las Vegas-style, one-armed bandit international gambling arena for the super wealthy. And derivatives will be the method, and please catch this, not the stock market, not the euro, the method of bringing down the currencies of the world, not just the American dollar, but the entire world, is a collapse of the derivative market. How can you know in advance, months before it happens, when the derivative market is going to collapse? He gave me 3 words, or 3 expressions. Number 1, he said, Chaplain, you will notice currency wars taking place. Let me try to explain a currency war if I can. The best way to do it is what happened on April the 14th of 2012. On that date, China stated that they were going to allow their currency to float from 0.5 to 1% against the American dollar. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but wait a minute. 0.5 compared to 1 is a 100% increase or decrease. If China allowed their currency to go to 1% instead of 0.5% against the American dollar, every product on the shelf in Walmart and Target would double in price. That's how drastic. That is what is known as a currency war, and China could do it. And he said to me, he said, Chaplain, there are going to be currency wars, and as you notice them increase, you will notice that there is a possibility of the final collapse getting closer and closer, because there are 3 factors that come into play. Now keep in mind what happened when the president of Brazil, and this happened on April the 11th of 2012, Brazil's president, Dilma Rousseff, came to America and met with our president, and she said, Mr. President, you can't do this again. She said, you cannot have a QE3. She said, you've got a Federal Reserve to back up your currency and print it out of thin air, but she said, we in Brazil don't have that. And we can't manage our currency like you can. She said, President, you cannot bring in a QE3. Why? If they put in something completely different, pulling $40 billion out of thin air and buying mortgage-backed securities. The Federal Reserve did not physically call it a QE3, even though most people labeled it as that. You knew what QE1 was, you knew what QE2 was, and now the nations of the world are saying, you can't do this again because you're going to destroy our currency. So he said to me, he said, Chaplain, whenever you see currency wars taking place around the world, this is the first thing to begin to take precautions. Secondly, he said, Chaplain, before the derivative market collapses, there will be trade wars. I said, try to explain a trade war to me. Well, earlier in this DVD, I did explain to you a certain trade war that was taking place, and it's called BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa got together, and they said, we are going to buy and sell products amongst ourselves, and we will not use the American dollar any longer, the reserve currency of the world, for these products, and we won't use the American dollar any longer as the petrodollar whenever we want to buy and sell crude oil, but we'll go through China and do it. Now, This is what is known as a trade war. And he said to me, he said, Chaplain, when you see currency wars escalate, and then you take very good precautions whenever you see trade wars beginning to happen. Then he said, Chaplain, there'll be one final straw that broke the camel's back. And whenever you hear this announced, it's too late. You won't have time to get out of that 401k and that IRA or that mutual fund or that paper that you have, whatever it may be. If it's written on a piece of paper, it's worth the paper it's written on. And forgive me for saying this over and over and over again, but I must get across to you what the elite have told me. Whenever you see this third point take place, it's over. It's gone. You've only got a matter of days. Whenever you hear it said by the Federal Reserve that they're going to begin to raise interest rates, it's all done. Now, the Federal Reserve has said that they positively will not raise interest rates through 2015. Don't bet on it. My elite friend said to me, he said, Chaplain, the moment you hear that they're going to raise interest rates, he said, it's too late. You must do something before then. Listen to something. A 1% rise in interest rates will add $140 billion to our national debt. Only a 1% rise. We can't handle that with the national debt that we have. Remember, that interest must be paid on that national debt. Well, we'll give the solutions to this when we come down to solutions in how to survive these next 4 years. Now you know how to know in advance before the financial collapse is going to take place. And if you don't heed the warning that the elite have given to me, this is all I can do for you, is tell you what they've told me. And I feel it a privilege that I can appear on this DVD and tell you things that you're not going to find anywhere else. Because only if you knew one of these individuals and could talk to them. And he said to me, he said, Chaplain, if you'd like to spare your house major heartache, he said, take precautions. Watch this, and you will know. Whenever you see these things happen, you have time to do something about it. Well, we were warned. Yes, very surprising. Ronald Reagan, of all people, warned us of what's happening today.
Now, one side in this campaign has been telling us that the issues of this election are the maintenance of peace and prosperity. The line has been used, we've never had it so good.
I won't have to worry about putting gas in my car. I won't have to worry about paying my mortgage. You know, if I help him, he's going to help me.
But I have an uncomfortable feeling that this prosperity isn't something on which we can base our hopes for the future.
The key point I'm making right now is that the economy is moving in a positive direction.
And yet our government continues to spend $17 million a day more than the government takes in.
You're telling me we got to go spend money to keep from going bankrupt? The answer is yes, I'm telling you.
We've raised our debt limit 3 times in the last 12 months. And now our national debt is 1.5 times bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world.
We're going to raise the debt limit. We always have. We will do it again.
We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce.
I have been informed by that the majority plans to block consideration of this amendment, which is number 1367, regarding the transparency at the Federal Reserve.
Foreign dollar claims are $27.3 billion.
It said that China has now surpassed Japan as the U.S. government's largest creditor, owning at least 10% of all U.S. debt, perhaps as much as $700 billion.
And we've just had announced that the dollar of 1939 will now purchase 45 cents in its total value.
President Obama is expected to face tough questions over the U.S. decision to pump $600 billion freshly printed dollars into its economy. Now, the move is an attempt to revive the country's finances, but will result in a devaluation of the dollar.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours,
you'll construct a legal regime to make indefinite detention legal.
history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
For some trips, it'll be faster than flying, without the pat down.
Anna was picked to go through. Pretty much everybody except the baby was picked to go through the scanner.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
Damn America, that's in the Bible.
Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
I've got a core set of values that I think have to be advanced, and that my individual salvation depends on our collective salvation.
You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down.
We had an election, and it was about a direction for our country.
And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. In this vote harvesting time, they use terms like the Great Society, or as we were told a few days ago by the President, we must accept a greater government activity in the affairs of the people.
E pluribus unum, out of many, one. In the end, that's what this election is about.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Over the course of 10 years, it would cost what it would cost us. All right, okay.
When the dollar fails, please give consideration to what is going to happen in your life and mine. All of our lives we've been able to depend on certain things. We were told that life insurance company, we could buy a life insurance policy when we were a young man, and we could pay on it all of our life, and when it came to time that life ended, that life insurance company would be there to help us. It won't be. Yes. One of the greatest disappointments is going to be is when the dollar fails, every life insurance company in America will never pay off. It'll all be over. You cannot depend on that life insurance. Now, when we come to the DVD, the next series after this of how to survive the next 4 years, solutions will be given to you by a Wall Street insider, a person who knows the financial world probably better than anyone I know in America today, a Christian who finally had to leave Wall Street because he couldn't stand the corruption any longer. And he will give you solutions to all of these things. But for right now, I'd like to enumerate the things that maybe you thought of and maybe you didn't think of. But if preparations are made right now, then, well, you figure it out for yourself. When the American dollar collapses, and that's what Ron Paul indicated, he said you've got at least 2 years. I say you probably have a little longer than that, according to what my elite friends have told me. But when it does, the life insurance companies of America are going to go with it. Now, they may say to you, oh, we'll double your premiums if you just pay a little bit more, or we'll give you half of what you were supposed to get when you die. You cannot depend any longer on insurance companies. You must become self-sufficient. Think of something else that's not going to be there. Your pension's not going to be there. Pensions now are so in debt, it's unbelievable. And the best thing to do is learn now how not to be obligated to these things. Get your pension, I don't care whether it's a private pension or a government pension. It matters not. The elite are going to create, I'll state again, such massive debt in every country, every state, every city. Do you realize all the pensions in all of those places, when the dollar collapses, that the pensions will collapse with it, and you must have made preparation prior to that. Again, mutual funds. Yeah, you've thought for years. Well, try to see if you really made any money on your mutual fund in the past year. Bonds, 401ks, IRAs, annuities, they're written on a piece of paper. You remember the expression that was given to me, chaplain, if it's written on a piece of paper, it is worth the paper it's written on. How are you going to survive? Very easily. These things didn't exist years ago, and you didn't depend on them. And it would have been better if we had never learned to depend on a piece of paper instead of depending on what our founding fathers told us was the real currency of America, which is gold and silver, and told the Congress of this country that they could mint, not print, but mint, which they did, gold and silver. And we had no national debt back in those days because they couldn't pull it out of thin air. The dollar is on its way out. There is coming a time when you will not be able to depend on paper any longer. And when that time comes around, what are you going to do? Nations are no longer using the American dollar. Someone said to me a while back, they said, well, chaplain, the American dollar is still good. I can still go to the grocery store and the hardware store and the drugstore, and I can still put my Federal Reserve note, that green piece of paper, or whatever color it may be, down on the counter, and I can get a product for it. They said, the dollar's not dead. Well, I'd like to show you why the dollar is already dead. It's just that the chickens haven't come home to roost yet. I'd like to list for you the nations who have within 12 months' time said, we're not going to use the American dollar anymore for sale and trade in our country. The first agreement was in February of 2012, when the second and third largest economies on the face of the earth signed an agreement. In fact, it was the largest trade agreement that's ever been signed in the history of this world, and China and Japan signed a trade agreement that they would buy and sell amongst themselves and would not use the American dollar for any of the sale and trade of those products. Are you catching it? They don't need the American dollar anymore. China is the second largest economy on earth. Japan is the third largest, and they don't need the reserve currency of the world anymore to sell and trade amongst themselves. So what's going to happen to those billions and billions of American dollars now that are floating around out there in the world, not being used any longer by China and Japan? You heard me use the expression a moment ago. I'm glad I was brought up on a farm, so I heard this expression many times. Son, the chickens are coming home to roost. Well, the American dollar, its days are limited. Again, look, if you will, to what happened on April the 27th of 2012 between China and Iran. We said, Iran, you can't develop a bomb. We're going to put sanctions on you. Europe said, no more oil from Iran. America said, you can't use the petrodollar to buy and sell your oil any longer. And Iran, being a large supplier of crude oil on the face of the earth, what are they going to do with their crude oil? Well, a number of nations came along, number one being China, and said, Iran, we want your crude oil. If the European Union won't take it, we will. And we will give you gold. We will ship it to you as payment for the oil. We will not use the petrodollar any longer for the sale and trade of this crude oil. Then look at Iran and India. Iran and India. Yeah, India said, we need your oil. This took place on March of 2012. Can't do it. India said, we'll pay you gold. Outright, we'll ship it to you if you'll just let us have your oil. So they said, we won't use the petrodollar any longer. Here are a few more $1 billion floating around out there in the world scene that aren't used anymore. Then look, if you will, to Saudi Arabia and China. Saudi Arabia said, oh yes, we are America's largest supplier of crude oil, but we will build a refinery in China and we will sell you our oil, and we will not use the American dollar for this sale. We will use Chinese currency, and Iran agreed. Then there's the BRICS group, which you heard me mention a moment ago, on April the 5th of 2012. And these nations said, we're not going to use the American dollar for the sale and trade of any products amongst ourselves any longer. And you heard what a large block of population this is. Then you come down to the latest ones, reserve currencies. And what's happened? China and Germany just signed an agreement saying, we won't use the American dollar any longer. Then there was China and Africa. And this is the very latest one. The Bank of Africa, the largest bank in Africa, said, we will handle Chinese currency for any product that any nation in Africa wishes to buy from China, and we will no longer use the American dollar. So what happens to the American dollar when it no longer is the reserve currency of the world? And there are trillions now, just with this group that I just mentioned to you, there are literally trillions of American dollars that are floating around in the world, unused, unwanted. They're coming back to America, and it normally takes 6 to 9 months for that currency to come back and haunt us. You say, Chaplain, the American dollar is sound. I can still go to the grocery store and buy groceries. No, the American dollar has already become no longer the reserve currency of the world, no longer the petrodollar of the world. It's going to come back. And when it does, you have never seen such inflation. You cannot imagine what's going to happen because of what has happened. The dollar is already dead. It just hasn't come back home to roost yet. Well, I've tried to do the best that I could to cover what will be happening to the dollar. It is determined already by the elite that the dollar will begin to become extinct. You've heard the nations that don't use it. You've heard about what the Federal Reserve is doing. You've had proven to you the national debt. We will give you solutions to all of this in how to survive the next 4 years from some very good financial professionals. I've tried to tell you what the elite have said to me will take place over the next 4 years with the American dollar. Therefore, we come to the next subject that I feel is so very, very vital and important to your knowledge according to what I've been told. The elite have an agenda for the Middle East, and it is going to affect you. Are you beginning to understand now why I said that when I heard these things just after the presidential election that I was literally stunned? And I couldn't figure out what to do. How do I tell the people? Well, you're beginning to see it now. And as we cover one subject after the other, you will realize how each of us is going to be affected. What will take place in the Middle East? I'm going to make some very definite predictions. I will never forget 3 years ago. We had warships, we had our Army, our Navy, our Air Force, right ready to invade Iran. And a very prominent radio talk show host, whom I will not give his name, have a great respect for him. And he called me on the phone and he said, Chaplain, are we going to invade Iran? I went to my elite friend who was in his 80s at that time, and I asked him the question. I said, is there going to be an invasion of Iran? He kind of chuckled over the phone, and he said, no, Chaplain, there's not going to be an invasion of Iran. It's just saber rattling. I went back to the talk show host and I said, I have been told by my elite friend that there will not be war with Iran for 2 years. Now you remember that. It's in the archives of many radio shows. Not because I knew it, but because the elite had already planned it. They plan everything in advance. Nothing happens by chance. It's all by prior declaring what they're going. Behind closed doors, all of this has already been decided. I'll show it in a moment. You'll see it. You're noticing that I'm pulling in many people to help me prove to you that what my elite friends have told me actually is taking place exactly as they said it's going to happen. What's going to happen in the Middle East? Well, about a year ago, another very prominent radio talk show host called me one day and he said, "Chaplain, are we going to have war with Iran?" I went back to my elite friend again and he said, "No, Chaplain, there's not going to be war with Iran." Well, I'm going to really stick my neck out now. A long, long ways. America will not invade Iran. Did you catch this? Now, I don't know what Israel will do. I really, if I could guess, no, I'm not going to do that. I won't guess. But you watch Israel very carefully. Without America, how can Israel invade Iran? There would be great problems for both countries. Iran, I'm guessing from what my elite friend has just told me, Iran will develop a nuclear device. And we'll put up with it. With merely making agreements and trying to talk things through and so on. We'll get around it. But mark my words, the elite have an agenda for the Middle East. Now, that agenda includes great turmoil. Yes, I would not want to be in Iran. I wouldn't want to be in Syria. I wouldn't want to be in Egypt or Libya. No Middle East country I'd want to have. I wouldn't even want to go there right now. One of my close friends who knows well the Middle East and travels there on a regular basis has filled me in on some of these things. There will be overthrow of many nations in the Middle East, and there will be oil price increases at some point. You'll notice that Assad in Syria has been able to hold off the plan of the elite for many months. This was not supposed to have happened. Again, let me say, the elite are not God. They just think they are. They don't always get everything they want. They wanted the price of gasoline at the gas pump much higher by now so that they could open up America's oil fields. Then Obama double-crossed the elite in his first administration and would not open up any of the federal lands for oil exploration. And he says he's not going to do it this time. And the elite are livid. They don't know what to do with this guy. In many ways, he's almost out of control in their hands. They wanted the American oil field to open up. The only one so far that has succeeded in developing is the Bakken field in North and South Dakota and Montana. And that's only because it's on private land. And there are millionaires being made up there by every week, numbers of millionaires. But they can't open up the North Slope of Alaska. They can't open up the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. They can't open up the oil field under Denver, Colorado, and another oil field in Utah. All of these oil fields, the federal government, Mr. Obama, has double-crossed the elite. He wants his Arab oil brothers, his Muslim Brotherhood to supply oil to America, and he double-crossed the elite and would not open up these federal lands for oil. And the elite have been set back some in the Middle East because of Syria and Assad, but there will be one nation after the other given to the Muslim Brotherhood. And then the final nation, please note this carefully. The final nation to fall to the Muslim Brotherhood is going to be Saudi Arabia. Oh, I know. You're doubting already. I'm just trying to tell you what I've heard. I want to show it to you. The best way to explain this is let someone much more prominent than Lindsey Williams give it to you. I'd like you to hear what retired General Wesley Clark says. Now, I don't really know whether he understood in its full ramifications back when he gave this speech a number of years ago. You'll remember that it was about 2010, beginning of 2011. When the problem was created in Egypt, and I went to my elite friend and I said, what in the world is going on in the Middle East? And he told me every single thing that was going to happen, even the nations in the order that they would be overthrown, and that our own federal government and State Department would have part in this and would give those nations to the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, you heard me correctly. Give them, just like they've done in Egypt, Libya, give, every time these nations are overthrown, giving them to the Muslim Brotherhood, creating massive chaos. Now keep something in mind. The elite are not Muslim. I know them. I lived with them for 3 years. The elite are not communist. They use the Muslims to accomplish their purpose, and when they get through with them, you mark my words, they'll throw them out in the bathwater. They're using the communists to accomplish what they want. And when they get through with them, they'll throw them out in the bathwater. The elite still have a new world order agenda. Now, they will give these nations one after the other to the Muslim Brotherhood, create every kind of chaos imaginable, and the last nation that will be in this chaotic condition will be Saudi Arabia, and I want you to hear somebody say it besides Lindsey Williams. So at this point, write down these nations in the order that retired General Wesley Clark gives them to you, and listen very carefully to the final nation that he says they are saving to last before they give it to the Muslim Brotherhood in order to create a $150 a barrel oil price, $6, $7 a gallon at the gas pump. Use that as one of the final straws to bring down the purchasing power of the American dollar, creating every kind of problem imaginable in our American economy, so that at some point when they collapse the derivative market, they can bring down every currency in the world overnight. Don't say you haven't heard it ahead of time. Listen, if you will, to retired General Wesley Clark.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
No nation could conquer Rome. Rome was too powerful, too strong, covered too much of the world. Only Rome could destroy Rome. Same thing is true in the United States of America. The only thing that will ever destroy America is too strong. It has too big of power. All of its military is too great. There's only one thing that will destroy America. That's America. One of the agendas of the elite over the next 4 years is to do away with the Constitution. It is scheduled to be done away with, if at all possible, in the next 4 years' time. How will they do it? Very simple, really. Executive orders, bribing Congress, debt creation so that the people become dissatisfied with their own country. Who knows what might happen over these next 4 years? But I know one thing, we still have that document. And it must be maintained. And the only way it can happen is because of you and me as an American. The only person who could ever destroy Rome was Rome. The only person that will ever destroy America is America. And I'm trying my best, if I can, just to tell you a simple statement, because this you'll have to watch take place over a 4-year period. The Constitution of the United States of America is scheduled to be done away with by some manner, by some method, over these next 4 years. I hope that this DVD will bring tears to your eyes. This is not a factual DVD. These are young people begging you. They can't vote, but they're begging you to maintain the Constitution of the United States of America so that when they grow up, they will have what you and I have had, this wonderful way of life in the United States of America. Watch, if you will, a plea from some young people who are very concerned.
I'm not old enough to vote.
I can't vote.
I can't vote.
I'm not old enough to vote.
But if I could.
But if I could.
If I could. If I could vote.
If I had a vote.
If I had a voice. I would vote for a candidate.
I would elect people
who stand up for the blueprint of this country. People who will protect our history.
Our culture.
Our language.
And our borders.
Men and women.
Who would uphold the separation of powers.
Who listen to the people.
Candidates who understand the Declaration of Independence.
Representatives that will protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States.
This election.
The election of 2012.
The November 6th election.
Is the most important.
The most critical. It's do or die.
November 2012. My future hangs in the balance. So, will you please?
Please.
Please.
Vote to protect my First Amendment rights.
Vote to protect my religious rights.
My right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of my own course in life.
My religious freedom. Unalienable rights.
Endowed by our Creator.
I'm only 14. I'm 13.
I'm 16.
I can't vote.
But you can.
So when you vote.
When you vote.
Vote for constitutionalists.
Vote for conservatives. Vote for people who will protect the First Amendment.
The 10th Amendment.
The Second Amendment.
The Bill of Rights.
Your temporary politicians
strapped us with $16 trillion in national debt.
Fix it.
Please, put people in office.
Who will stop the spending?
People who will balance the budget.
Vote for constitutional candidates.
People who will stop the assault on religious liberty.
When in the course of human events,
it has become necessary
for one people
to do the right thing.
I don't need the government telling me what lunch to eat.
What toilet to flush.
I don't need the government telling me to drive an electric car.
Forcing me to buy health insurance.
I don't need government giving guns to Mexican drug lords.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
Lower taxes.
Less government. More jobs.
No more ballooning deficits.
A strong military.
Reagan principles.
Vote for liberty over tyranny. No more social engineering.
No more socialism.
No more social programs.
No more handouts.
We need to protect our border.
We need one common language.
We need a united
and unique American culture.
Please vote for patriots.
In the spirit of the founders.
Patriots.
Candidates.
To restore constitutional America.
Restore constitutional
America.
God bless.
America.
Liberty is never more
than one generation from extinction.
And we are
that generation.
If not you,
who? If not now,
when?
Earlier in the presentation, I mentioned a number of factions that are at work right now that weren't there prior to the election. Many things have changed since this last election. And that's the reason I felt it so necessary to do this presentation on the next 4 years, because many things that you had never dreamed of, had never thought of, had never even considered, have come into play now that are going to affect your life and mine. One of them, let's go back to those factions again. You remember I said that as long as you and I can remember, we have known what the elite are. It's been no secret. Books have been written about it. Many, many years ago, a book was written entitled Tragedy and Hope. And when the elitist, yes, it was one of them, when he wrote the book, someone said to him after he wrote it, they said, "Why would you write this book?" And he said, "I'm not concerned." And he told everything the elite were doing and what they were going to do. And some of it's coming to pass even yet. And they said, "Well, why would you write all this?" He said, "Nobody would believe it anyway." That was his exact answer. Well, today you're facing something that we have these factions. Number one, we have the elite that we've known as long as any of us have been around to know what's going on. Secondly, you have an out-of-control president. That's right. Like a bull in a china shop. Even the elite have been double-crossed by him in this first administration. Thirdly, you have a renegade, wild card elite that is popping up out there in the world that did not have to be considered 1 year ago. Now, what I'm about to give you is not something that the old-time elite that you and I have known, that I have rubbed shoulders with for 36 years, that I lived with for 3 years as their chaplain at Prudhoe Bay. These people are not doing what you're about to hear, but they have warned me. Believe me, I have received numerous emails from my elite friend stating that Mr. Obama plans this agenda himself. I need to state once again, and I hope you will think this through, the elite are not socialist. The elite are free enterprise capitalist. That's the reason, the way they've made their fortunes. They will bring in the new world order as a free enterprise capitalist, total control under the auspices of the elite, not under the auspices of communism, not under the auspices of Muslim. They're not going to allow that. They're going to bring in a new world order by creating such chaos in the entire world that they basically will control everything under the auspices of, they'll bring everything back again after they have brought it to a point where everyone will be willing to accept their new currency and their new world order. Then after this happens, they bring this world back out of chaos again, not under socialism, not under Islam, not under Sharia law, but under free enterprise capitalism, where they have the total control. And I try my best to explain the mindset, the thought patterns of these people. I beg of you, will you please go to the web and get a copy of my book, Energy Non-Crisis. You can get it on Amazon Kindle. You must read To Seduce a Nation. I wrote it so that you'll understand the mindset of the elite and understand the founding fathers. And when you understand these things, you'll be able to understand exactly what the elite are doing. Here we go. Socialism, the socialization of America, is going to be appalling over the next 4 years. You have never seen the like of socialism being introduced into the United States of America by our president and by his chosen administration. And it's going to affect every life. It's also going to affect the elite. I don't know what they're going to do about it. I will promise you this. Every time I contact my elite friend and he tells me something, I promise you, I'll tell you. And you will follow the order of what they do over the next 4 years and how they respond to the socialization of America and what forces they put into play. This is not going to be pretty. Let me put it this way. You remember the old-fashioned Western movies when it would come down to the saloon and all of a sudden somebody would start a fight in the saloon and before you knew it all the tables were being overthrown, they were shooting and everybody was fighting and somebody was caught in the middle of that. One of your favorite cowboy characters was caught in the middle. He couldn't get out. He was there caught in the middle of this fist fight. I want to warn you of something. Everyone viewing this DVD, you and I are going to be caught in the middle of a fist fight. We're going to be caught in something that's not going to be pretty. And it's going to be between the elite and the president. Mark my words, you haven't seen it yet. You're going to see it over these 4 years progressively. And it's not going to be nice. It's not going to be something you enjoy. So I'd like you to see the proof of where the president stands. And keep in mind who the elite are. I know them. I'll be in touch with them. I'll inform you. We've made it so that we can produce a DVD series very quickly now so that I can help you as quickly as possible. So I'd like you to see, first of all, what a Green Beret says. You heard me correctly. A man who served our country. He risked his life for the sake of the United States of America. He now is retired. I want you to listen to what a Green Beret has to say about warning you of the socialism that will be introduced into America over the next 4 years. I want you to see here a Hungarian immigrant. He came from socialism. He begs you, he pleads with you to please take action. I'd like you to hear what Obama said to Putin. Yes, the mic was supposed to have been turned off, but it wasn't. And it's on the internet now. You'll see it right here if you haven't heard it. And then, I wish I didn't have to show this next one. But if you happen to be a person who can't hear, you're deaf, and you can read lips, you'll understand this one. I want you to hear what President Obama's wife had to say. So listen, if you will, to the socialization of America in a manner that is going to utterly appall you over the next 4 years. And watch the battle that you're going to be caught in the midst of.